You're listening to Leader Tribe, where leaders are made daily, but never in a day. We're talking skills that are relevant, researched, and ready for action. Apply these and you will grow. Here's your daily dose of growth with Dr. Rob McClelland.
Hello, Leader Tribers. How in the world are you? Dr. Rob coming from Atlanta. Trust you're doing fantastic today. It is going to be a great week. I'm starting off, this is sort of a management week, not only managing yourself, managing your networks, but also managing people. We're going to look at several different things this week that I think you're really going to enjoy. For me, I think the pinnacle will be on Wednesday when I share a new story from Patrick Lencioni. He's the 5 dysfunctions of a team guy, the table group guy. You heard a Leader Tribe interview with Patrick over a couple of days. That would have been a couple of weeks ago. So here we go. Last week I was in Chicago. I was out there for some university board meetings, and I love university board meetings, even though this one was a little difficult. Some real issues that we had to deal with as a board and with the president of the university, the administration of the school and the board of directors working together to get it right. And so it was a tough couple of days, but I was staying over the weekend in Chicago because I was doing some mergers and acquisition training there on Tuesday. And so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was there with a company that was paying me to do mergers and acquisitions. I think most of you know by now that I do that. And so usually every single week I'm in a different city in North America, and I'm working with people who are looking to sell their business and ensuring that they understand how they can get maximum value. Most people don't know. They know how to sell a house. They have no idea how to sell a business, how to evaluate a business, how to know how much it's worth, all of those types of things. Okay, so now I'm in Chicago. I want to tell you about 3 conversations that I had over 3 days that were just life-changing to me. And I want to encourage you to take advantage of your network and to have better and better conversations. First one that I would like to talk about, it's with a friend from Norway. His name is Christian. He heads up a private equity group there. He's a partner, I guess I should say, in a private equity group. And he invested an hour on the phone with me, really helping me to understand when private equity groups, private investment groups, family office groups, things like that. These are people with a lot of money, and they have to invest the money. They get the money from their investors for one reason, and that is to invest in other companies. What are the things that really help them to know exactly the type of companies that they want to go after, the types of companies that they believe are going to be a good investment opportunity for them versus the ones that they pass on? Here is why the conversation was so fascinating for me. Because as Christian was helping me to understand and get into the mindset, and he's just brilliant at the way he explains things, it really helped me to say, these are skills that are used in life. This isn't just something for private investing, but anytime that I want to convince somebody of a certain position, or anytime I want to get somebody to invest in a nonprofit, or I want to share any business opportunity, some of these same skills, same characteristics transfer. And so it was super helpful for me. 2 things that really popped out for me. Number 1 is the story. Man, if you've got somebody and they've got a great story, they've got passion behind the story isn't about, hey, I want to make money, here's an opportunity, but here is why this is important, and here's why I'd really like you to take a look at it, because this can be super helpful to people, to you, to me, and to others. Anytime something that you're doing has a good, passionate story behind it, the opportunity, it perks up the ears of those around you. So certainly for private equity groups, if they're looking to invest in a company, they want to say, what is the story? Is this just a rehearsed story? Is this something that they're really living on the inside? That was brilliant, super helpful to me, applies in many, many areas of life. The other thing that Christian said that I thought was brilliant is, do they have a plan? Do they have a strategic plan, a growth plan? Have they thought through this? Do they say, we're looking for investment capital, here's why, because here's the plan that we're going to use going forward? Hey friends, I used to work with major donors a lot. We were raising money for nonprofit organizations, doing some really cool things in the United States and around the world. And one of the things that I would tell younger people in that field all the time is that you've got to have a plan. You can have a story, you'll get a little bit of money. You can have a plan without a life change story, you'll get a little bit of money. But when you can put a story together with proof that it's already been changing lives, that's where you get the larger dollars. That's where people put an extra zero on the end. I saw that same thing coming true in my conversations with Christian when he talked about, does this company have a plan, or are they just saying, we need money, we need resources, we want to do more of the same old thing? Why do they believe it will work? Why do they know it will work? Have they done the hard work ahead of time? Here's where I want to end what we're talking about today. If you have a story, if you've lost your story, if you're depressed or if you're down or you just don't see any way out or you're bored or you're teetering on burnout, if you've got hypertension in your life because you just are kind of spinning your wheels, that is no fun to live there. You've got to get back to that place in life where you have a story. There's something in your heart that is burning, that you want to be a part of, that you want to share with others. And then here's the second part, work your plan. Maybe one of the reasons that your story is fading into the sunset is because you've just been going through the motions over and over again, making the same mistakes, getting stuck, and you need to take a step back and say, I need to develop some better habits, start small, and then all of a sudden work the plan. Take the next right step. Do the next right thing. Hey, this is Dr. Rob. I'm going to pick up right there tomorrow. We're talking about Management Week. Until then, much love. I'm out. Hey friends, Dr. Rob here. Hope you're doing fantastic today. Looking forward to this week. We're talking about Management Week, managing ourselves, managing our relationships, and then managing our teams. I left off the podcast yesterday finishing with a story about my friend Christian in Norway, who really helped me understand why private equity want to invest in some companies and others are going to pass. And there's some real applications for life there. He helped me in a ton of other areas. I took notes, and I just can't thank him enough for the hour that he invested on the phone to help me grow as a leader. That was great. The very next day, I talked to a guy in Chicago who is unbelievable at putting together strategic growth plans for companies. So he goes in, he works with companies doing strategic growth plans. They're expensive, but oh my goodness, they pay for themselves 10 times over in the first year. Let me give you a quick example. He's working with this company. They have 1,500 different products, okay? 1,500 different products that they can ship to their customers. And so they come to him because they're really wondering, should we go ahead and build another warehouse? And he said, well, let's take a look at this first before we build more places to store these products. So he goes in and he works. He has these 1,500 products. He calls them SKUs, different things that you could get the SKU from or things that you could sell. And he looks at all of the products and the profit margin on each product. And he finds out that all of their profit, all their real profit, is only coming from about 300 of the products out of the 1,500. So 300 products are really where they're making their money. The others they might make a little on, they might lose a little on, they might be kind of break even. They're certainly not getting rich on those other 1,200 products. So when he looks at this, he says, okay, here's what we've got to do. Those 300 products, we've got to put more marketing dollars behind those because they have a high profit margin. We're killing it on those. And these 500 over here where we're probably losing money, we're doing break even at best. Let's close that down and just sell off the inventory, count that as a loss, and all those in-between products, that other 700 products or so that where we might make a little, we might not, we're going to raise the prices on those areas. Hey, we don't mind it. We'll still sell it to you, but we've got to make sure we're making money. And if you don't want to pay that price, that's okay. It's not going to be super disappointing to us. Why? Because that's not where we make our money. And so he takes the 700 products, they put them to the side, and they basically raise all the prices on those. And guess what? Some people want them and they'll pay the higher price. It's no big deal. But that other 300, that's where they really concentrated their efforts. And here's what they found out. They were able to reduce the workforce because they weren't shipping out so many products. They weren't building a new warehouse. As a matter of fact, they could get rid of a warehouse for all the products that they weren't going to be selling anymore. Their margins went way up because their profit went up, their payroll costs went down, and it was all part of someone coming in from the outside and putting together a strategic plan for them. Wow. I learned so much from the guy. I said, well, how do you evaluate people? How do you evaluate the leadership team? Fantastic conversation. And I wanted to ask you, I couldn't wait to share this with you, the Leader Tribers, and say, what is it in your life that you continue to invest in, but there's really no return there, that you just need to cut it out or go crazy with it, but just stop going through the motions? There's so many things in our life, so many relationships, so many things that we've been doing for a long time, and we just keep doing them, but we don't need to do it anymore. Cut those out and invest in yourself in the areas where you're seeing the greatest return. Finally, one other conversation that I had last week, it was the very next day, and it was a guy who does high finance. He's worked with some big companies. He's worked with some incredible leaders of top companies, but he got into a situation with some of those leaders where he could get super vulnerable with them, and they were super vulnerable with him. As a matter of fact, some of these people, they had made so much money, but they realized life wasn't really that great except for all the things they could afford. But who they were on the inside, they weren't happy with that. So they got together a group of people, about 200 it grew to in North Carolina, and then they started expanding it to other places. These vulnerability-based groups where people could, you don't come in, you don't say how great you are, you don't talk about yourself, you say, here's who I really am on the inside and here's where I need help. And seeing the growth and the joy that came into their lives that money could never bring. Again, I'm sitting there, I spent an hour with the guy going through this, asking him questions. It was a fantastic time. And here's what I took away from it. I couldn't wait to get back with you, the Leader Tribers, and to share what I had learned, and thought, you know what? A lot of the things that we do bring joy. A lot of the times we earn money. That brings joy because it can buy things in our life, and it can give us an avenue to share with others. Those things make us happy. But there's nothing like being happy on the inside, getting it right on the inside, and saying, where are my centers of joy, and what has been getting in the way of those centers? Where are the parts where I'm just going through the motions? Where are the things in my life where I'm caught in some cycle of sin and it's bringing shame in my life? And no matter how well things go on the outside, they're not really going that great on the inside. You get the inside right and everything else is brighter. Hey, that's it, friends. I want to stop right there. All I've done is told you about some conversations that I had the privilege of having last week in Chicago. They were life-changing for me. Here's my challenge to you. You know people, but it's all, hey, how's it going? Fine. How are you? Fine. Pick somebody that would be very meaningful for you, that you could sit down and have a deeper conversation with. Maybe have them listen to the last 2 days of this podcast and then say, let's go deeper and figure out how we can grow together. These conversations are life-changing. I want to be a lifetime learner. I want to encourage you that way as well. Tomorrow, a great story from Patrick Lencioni about something that happened in his life recently. Until then, much love. I'm out. Hello, Leader Tribers. How in the world are you? I trust you're doing fantastic today. Hey, remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago by now, I had the privilege of going back to my hometown and doing some training. And so I spent a couple of weeks of the podcast saying, Here's the things that I trained them on in that half day of training. And so I was sharing them with you, and it was some great information, great research. But one of the guys who was in that training is a friend of mine named Leo. And he was not one of the school leaders who was there. He was a businessman in Northern California. I just love this guy. We met through a mutual friend originally. We've been on some trips to Canada together. Every time I've seen the Northern Lights, it was with Leo standing beside me, just marveling at the beauty of creation. And the whole time I was wishing it wasn't Leo, it was my wife, as I'm seeing all this beauty. Leo, if you're listening, sorry about that, but you get what I'm saying. Anyway, Leo is a leadership guy. He just loves this stuff. And he told me Patrick Lencioni was going to be coming to Northern California soon, and he was looking forward to it. Well, one of the reasons that Patrick was coming to Northern California had to do with that community that is still in recovery. Remember last year they had the Camp Fire that was in Paradise, California. That's my hometown area where I grew up. I grew up in Oroville, California, which is about 15 miles from Paradise. And so 88 people died in those wildfires. And that's where the people were fleeing for their lives, and the entire community was just devastated. So now where are all those people going to go live? All their homes are gone. And so they went to the nearby communities. They went to Chico and to Oroville, to Durham, places around there. And it's just amazing. If you can imagine, their entire lives are gone. They can't go back to Paradise because the businesses aren't there to support them anymore. And so that community, during this time of hurting and time of trouble, Patrick went there and he wrote about it. And so I am going to read to you what Patrick wrote as a result. This is from Patrick Lencioni. Anyone who knows me understands that among the books I've written, one of my favorites is The Truth About Employee Engagement. My affinity for this book is the simplicity and efficacy of its message. Employees only need 3 things from their managers to love their work. Really. And if that doesn't sound unbelievable enough, those 3 things are absolutely free. Before I touch on those 3 things, let me explain the reason for this essay. Last week, I had the amazing experience of participating in an activity related to this book, one that I will never forget. It was called the Engaged Manager Event, and it was held in an auditorium on the campus of Chico State University, which is located 200 miles from my home in the foothills of northeastern California. Well, I don't know about Chico. If you don't know about Chico, you may have heard about a rural community located 20 miles away called Paradise. That is the town that almost a year ago burned to the ground in what is now called the Camp Fire, the deadliest and most destructive fire in California history. 88 people died as a result of that fire, and more than 27,000 had to leave their community because their homes were destroyed. News reports and YouTube videos can't convey what happens in communities like Paradise. One must drive through the neighborhoods and see nothing but standalone brick fireplaces and charred trees to get a real sense of what took place there. Beyond the overwhelming physical and emotional devastation in Paradise, there was the reality of the larger community of Butte County figuring out how to care for and absorb so many friends and neighbors. From housing shortages and job displacement, the collective strain on the community can't be overstated. As you can imagine, the national media has moved on to other stories, but the struggle and heroism in Paradise and Chico and Butte County continue to this day. The Table Group was able to partner with the Chico Executive Group to host a rally of sorts, one that brought together more than 1,100 leaders in the area to learn to transform the lives of their employees through better people management. Those leaders represented more than 160 amazing organizations, from startups to nationally known companies to hospitals and churches. The experience was unlike anything I've ever been involved in during my 22 years in business. We talked about how leaders in Chico area could forever change the lives of mothers and fathers and neighbors and friends by being more intentional in the way they go about managing their employees. We collectively dreamed of a time, only a few years from now, when Butte County would be known as one of the very best places in the country for employees to work, where they would leave for the office or farm or school or brewery in a good mood every morning and come home to family and friends more hopeful and fulfilled than when they left. Audience members at the event were passionate and engaged, asking practical questions about how to apply the principles in the reality of their day-to-day working environments. In spite of all they had been through, more than a few of the people in the audience had lost their homes. There was a sense of hope and determination that we could not have imagined. One particular moment I will never forget. A guy who works for the largest hospital in the area, Enloe Healthcare, raised his hand and asked this question in a skeptical but not too cynical way. I'm in charge of facilities and maintenance. Are you telling me that I'm supposed to go up to my guys who fix ice machines and explain that their jobs really make a difference to the lives of the patients? After teasing him just a little, I explained that my answer was yes. When I explained that everyone needs to know why their job matters, he seemed to accept my reply, at least mostly. But what happened next is what floored me. A woman further back in the auditorium raised her hand and in a slightly timid voice said, "I have a question." Well, it's not a question, just a comment. She seemed to be asking for permission, so I encouraged her to continue. Well, I just want to say that I recently had a baby at Enloe, and I really appreciated that they always had ice. The place went nuts. Everyone broke into laughter and applause. The facilities manager was practically in tears, and that is what this is all about, giving every employee in a company, or even better, in an entire community, a sense of purpose and fulfillment in their work. Friends, I love this story because that's my community. The head trauma surgeon at Enloe Hospital is a dear friend of mine. I've spent much time with, gone fishing with. The guy is fantastic. He went over and led some hospitals in an organization that I used to lead, hospitals over in Africa. So I know this people. I live this life. And Patrick shared the only three things that employees need to be happy. Number one, they need to be known by their manager. Number two, they need to know that their job matters to someone in some way. And number three, they need to know whether they are doing their job well. Hey, I want to stop right there. If you'd like to follow up on those, I would encourage you, just buy the book. It's entitled The Truth About Employee Engagement. It's by Patrick Lencioni. It is fantastic. As a matter of fact, I actually do training in this area. I go out to corporations, I go out to businesses, and I teach Patrick Lencioni's stuff. I use his materials. I'm one of the trainers who's bought in and purchased all of the hardcore training materials that he does, and I spend a lot of my time teaching companies and corporations in the area of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and again, in this area, in employee engagement. I love doing it because it makes a difference. It will make a difference in your life. Hey, this is Dr. Rob. Until tomorrow, much love. I'm out. Hello, Leader Travelers. How in the world are you? Dr. Rob with you. It's been quite a week. First couple of days this week, I talked about some incredible conversations that I had last week in Chicago. And then yesterday, we read a story from Patrick Lencioni that happened in Northern California, very close to the place where all those wildfires broke out and all the people died last year, and something that made a difference for the entire community. I hope you have the opportunity to listen to those. Today, in our final edition of the week, I want to go back to the third conversation that I talked about. I talked about it on Tuesday about the guy who was really good at vulnerability and who took the opportunity to be with some people who had made a lot of money in their life, but they were still not happy on the inside. And so they got in a group that had unbelievable vulnerability. And so here is something that was actually written by somebody in Patrick Lencioni's organization over at the Table Group. You could find this article online. It's called Watch Out for These Vulnerability Killers. There are things that you think that you could do to really get better vulnerability and get deeper, but ultimately they actually kill the process rather than helping it. Are you ready? Here we go. The first vulnerability killer is confusing being supportive with being efficient. The illustration that's given here is somebody wants to be vulnerable. They come to their boss and they say, hey, I'm really struggling with this particular process or this particular project. And so what the boss does, wanting to be efficient, goes, hey, you know what? I understand that's hard. I'll tell you what, why don't I reassign that to this person over here and I'll give you a new project to work on. Well, guess what? Basically, what you did is you just totally shut down their vulnerability. They're being vulnerable, coming, asking for help, so you took it away from them. Guess when they're going to be vulnerable with you again? Never. Why? Because you were worried about being efficient rather than being supportive. In those situations, what can you do to be supportive? An illustration's giving here about a lady who came to her boss and she was really having trouble with her customer support team, getting them to modernize with some new technology. And so after struggling with this problem for a bit, she went to the CEO and they took it to the executive team. The CEO said to her, hey, you still own this, but we're all here to help. So where are the problems and how can the rest of the team help you? And it led to this very robust discussion of everyone jumping in, giving her help and perspectives. And so she could go on to be successful. So if somebody comes to you and they're vulnerable, you don't just reassign and get really efficient. What can you do to be supportive? Number 2, vulnerability killer. And that is this: fostering a spirit of competition internally. Hey, you always want to compete out there in the marketplace and you're competing with your competitors everywhere else. But if you foster this spirit of competitiveness internally and all of a sudden you say, hey, this guy in sales is beating the rest of you. You guys got to try to catch him. Well, now everyone's going to be in it for themselves, looking at this as individual tasks and seeing who gets the big bonus rather than the privilege and the opportunity of working together. Here's the story from the article. It says, I recently worked with a CEO client who recognized this tendency in himself. He had hired a new head of marketing who was extremely talented with an incredible background. The CEO focused so much on that talent and background that the new head of marketing suddenly could do no wrong. And as luck should have it, marketing got a huge budget increase the next quarter. The rest of the team felt they needed to compete. And before long, every team member's mistakes, imperfections, vulnerabilities began to be concealed. Well, soon enough, the CEO recognized the need to communicate and reward shared goals rather than individual performances. If you have one area of your company or one area of your team that's killing it and the rest aren't, and so you're saying, hey, why can't the rest of you be like that? Friends, you are not going to win overall. You have to get to the place where you're sharing the joy of winning together. And so what you need to do in those situations is this is not competition internally. It is competition externally with the other people who are out there, the other companies and services, specifically in marketing, revenue, margins, all of those types of things. But don't foster internal competition to the point where you no longer have shared goals or you're on each other's team. And finally, the last point that I'm going to make, and this is the last one for the week, setting clear expectations and then not telling anyone. You want to have a vulnerability killer? You want vulnerability to go right out the window? Have expectations for other people on the team, but then not communicate them clearly. Remember something that I've said over and over again: clarity is the antidote to fear. If you don't have clarity, you will have fear. Then you don't know, is this good enough? Should I be doing this? Is there something else I should work on? As soon as you get clarity, even if it's bad news, you don't fear it anymore. Now you know exactly what to do. And so, friends, if you have the privilege of working on a team, but it is not clear who's doing well, who's failing, where the bumps in the road are, where the challenges are, oh, that's going to be a killer, and people will not be vulnerable in those situations because they're not really sure what the end game is. You have to have clarity. If you just go over to leadertribe.com, go to the search engine, put in the word clarity, you'll see a ton of resources I've developed to help you get clarity between you and your boss, you and your workplace, you and what you should be working on. Access those tools, help yourself out, get clarity. If you don't have clarity, vulnerability will be killed. Even great leaders slip up, make mistakes, get negative once in a while. But if you keep clarity in your life and in your job, you will win in the end. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week on management, managing ourselves, managing our networks, and then managing our teams. Until next week, much love. I'm out.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Leader Tribe podcast. For all the free bonuses and growth articles, join the tribe. It's free. Just head on over to leadertribe.com to sign up, and we'll see you tomorrow for another daily dose of growth.